afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Oilfield Leader Podcast. Today, we are very pleased to have Mr. Lloyd Brown, who's co-founder of Smart Chemical Services LP, and he's also been named one of the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies for 3 years in a row. Lloyd currently serves as vice chairman. Additionally, Lloyd has also founded the mentoring practice Refined by Failure, and he serves on the Amarillo Economic Development Corporation and is the former chairman of the board. Currently providing mentoring services to the West Texas A&M Enterprise Center, Lloyd is a serial entrepreneur and he's the author of a fantastic book we're going to talk a little bit about, Refined by Failure. Going to be a great episode. Thank you so much for being here, Lloyd.
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate you inviting me to be here.
So, Lloyd, I would like to start talking a little bit about your book, Refined by Failure, and how it relates to Smart Chemical and some of the lessons that you learned.
Well, probably the biggest thing this was discovered through writing the book, because the book's about, it started to be about how great our 10 rules were. And I still think that they're meaningful and they provide healthy boundaries within how to run a business. But the best lessons I learned were the consequences when I broke my own rules. And from going through that, I went on a journey of trying to understand why I broke those rules. What was I missing? What information did I have? What beliefs did I have that led me to sometimes knowingly and sometimes unknowingly violate those rules? And so the journey that probably the most impactful for myself and also for those that I work with today is helping discover what my why is, why I do what I do, and also understanding that, my identity is not tied to what role I'm playing. It really is much more founded on who I am and how I define who I allowed my identity to be tied to. And so, really understanding that I'm a child of God and nothing more, nothing less. There is nothing more than that. And there's nothing less than that, valuing everybody from that standpoint, no matter what their role. That's really been part of that learning process.
That's fascinating what you said about the roles that we play. I generally don't couch many things in terms of God because not everyone is religious, even though I am and I have my religious belief. And what I try to do is I try to stick to science, which is obviously that the universe is nothing more than a field of energy, and we are concentrated forms of energy in that field. And all we really ever do is we're engaged in energy arbitrage, which is taking energy from the situation or from the person, mixing it with our own, and then kicking it back out. And hopefully, if one knows their why and one knows their purpose, then the focusing of that energy can be so much greater, in my opinion, of course.
I respect your opinion. For me, I don't set that as an expectation for everybody to find the boundary that they or the belief of where we come from. For me, it is really just to say that I find my value in myself and also others based on the definition of how Jesus showed a way to live a perfect life and not to be thinking more of myself or less of myself and the same for others. And so I brought that into the conversation because I think it's really important to realize that we have I want to make sure I say this correct, so thank you for your patience. I think it boils down to value. How do I have an over sense of value of myself versus somebody else, or do I see you, Christian, as a person that is not better than me and is not less than me, but is an equal? And that in such, it's finding out the best way to help you find and also resource you in a way that you feel like you're doing um, what you're intended to do, what you're meant to do, no matter the role that you're playing, right? Because when we're working together, if we don't have a sense of value of each other, we'll either demean or set expectations that are unreasonable, and that's something that I've learned that many times I had unreasonable expectations of others, but most importantly, had very unreasonable expectations of myself.
Yeah, that's one of the harder things, isn't it? To have grace and patience with yourself. And what you said about value, I frequently find that we can't value others if we don't value ourselves. And I find that I take that level of self respect. If someone doesn't respect themselves, they can't respect others. But when someone has a sense of self and they have a direction, it's much easier to point them and help them in the right direction. Would you say so?
It's self belief. And I love the saying, and I had to go research to find out who said this, but whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. And, Henry Ford has been credited with that. And it it's true. And I think that ties back to what you just said. So when we're looking at how, you know, the lessons that I've learned, that's been one of the bigger things is mindset's extraordinarily important, and who you value or how you value is the most important mindset.
Hmm. If you were going to build another business or another organization today, similar to Smart Chemical or with similar contours, what are some of the lessons from the past that you learned that you would apply in a new business venture today?
Realize that you don't have to do it all yourself. A lot of the roles when I started Smart, um, I did multiple multiple roles. And I'm a big fan of the book Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. He's the founder of Strategic Coach. And it really, in today's world where we can go and find subject matter experts in so many different areas, and there's no excuse really to go find the people that can help you on your journey instead of uh, failing multiple times working to become competent on something that's really not a skill set. And I, I would, there would be some opportunities to, I believe, move much faster because I wouldn't sit back and try to figure out things that I don't need to figure out. I just need to find the person, the who that can fulfill that role, and whether they're a full time team member or somebody that comes in a as a 1099 support type person. So that would be the first thing, and the second thing is really have a much higher defined clarity of the business segment that I would focus on, not try to be all things to all people, or in my case, recreate um, a business that in many ways looked, smelled, felt like the one that my dad had created. And one day somebody said, "Do you realize this is just almost just like Unichem?" And it was. I mean, we had a lot, almost every identical business unit, and um, that probably was a subconscious decision. And I think we need to be more intentional and decisive, and so I would focus on doing less, not doing more, but doing what I did really, really well.
That's very interesting because I think that most business owners tend to think that they need to be in control of everything, they need to know everything, and everything has to run through them, or they're losing control and they don't know what's going on in their business. And in my rereading of Michael Gerber's The E Myth Revisited, I want to add some overlay to that where he discussed that every position in your company, your new business, has to have very clearly defined roles: president, vice president, etc. And even something as simple as the role of the guy who packs boxes in the warehouse. You need to pack those boxes in the warehouse until you know exactly how it goes and you know exactly how to write an SOP for that. What does it look like when someone does a good job, when they do a bad job, when things have been achieved? And now you have something to measure it against. So I've been finding that issue of roles very interesting. Could you speak a little bit as to the roles? When I was reading Refined by Failure, I remember reading some parts where there was not such clear role definition in your company. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, well, the roles were definitely not well defined. Um, I wanted to give people the freedom to do um, what I believe they have had the competency and capacity to do. But one of the challenges is you still need to have uh, a very high level of understanding of what that expectation is. And if it's not communicated well, Christian, um, you end up, if you're in that role, you're doing what you can to fulfill it in your mind's eye versus us going through and getting great clarity around um, what the expectation is on both sides. Because what I found, and by the way, I'm a recovering know-it-all, so I normally introduce myself. Hi, I'm Lloyd, and I'm a recovering know-it-all. Because to your point, know-it-alls do it all themselves. They and I set myself up for a lot of failure because if I didn't know it, I would fake it, and when you fake it, you end up taking some really um, you make mistakes that have unintended expectations. Or unintended consequences, not expectations. But if you don't set really the number one thing, a time frame that you have an expectation for something to be done, and then what is the pass for the quality of that expectation. And a lot of times we say pass fail, but really I'm learning that it's pass no pass. Because if we don't pass, it means we didn't have an understanding of the requirements to get to where what we're doing, the product, the service, the role that we're playing, that we're delivering what is needed for the business and the expectation for the business. And generally speaking, I'm finding that failure comes from a poor process of helping team members understand their role, the importance to the organization, and that the processes that we have are there to protect them, protect their reputation, and not to control them. And in defining that and building the trust behind the process and the real understanding why the process even exists, then we have the opportunity to really set some foundations in the relationship, and those things end up blessing the customer. The business is automatically blessed because those team members that are forward facing to the customers, they're doing things at the standards that we're looking for, whether they're manufacturing or on the service side. It really fits in all areas. So one other thing about being a know-it-all is you don't really like process. You like to tell people what to do instead of teach them, educate them, and enable them.
Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he frequently discusses the need to begin with the end in mind. You need to already know where this vision is going, which can be very difficult because as a leader or as a business owner, you're really not too sure where it could wind up going. But one thing I think is very important is for the leader and business owner to be able, as you had referenced, to be able to infuse so much more into that employee other than it just being transactional. Okay, you're going to get paid X per hour, you're going to do Y, and if you mess up, you're doing this, you're doing that, and it's wrong. And we're always filled with roles and we're filled with rules all the time. But my question really goes back more towards the leader in that, how would you let a business leader or a business owner, a nascent or new business owner, how would you get the message across to them that they really need to invest in their people, in the people themselves? How would you get that message across?
Well, the first thing we go back to is to really understand the why you're in business. Many of us have an idea or a product, and we think we're going to go run out and we're going to sell that product. And that's how businesses start, right? We have a service or we have a product and we jump in with both feet. And once you've been in business, most of the folks that I work with, they've been in business for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And the reason that they got into the business does not define why they're in the business today. So one of the things we really want to gain clarity is around their why. What is their personal why? Because the one thing that I found is in life, there is no such thing as work-life balance. There's life balance. If you're looking to have work-life balance, you're living 2 separate lives, and one of them's a lie, maybe both. And if we know personally what our why is, to the way that we're going to live our life, it applies both at home and at work. And then so you start living a life that's much more intentional, and it also starts eliminating compromising your values. One thing that in Refined by Failure, there was multiple times that I compromised my values because I didn't want to lose a relationship, which almost every time ended up costing me the relationship. So that's where I start. And if I'm working with somebody that's brand new starting in business, we're going to get our arms around what the why is, because if you don't know the why, you can start doing a lot of what's. You can start trying to figure out how we're going to do it, but ultimately the result, it meanders. It doesn't have. It's really hard to make sure that you know that you're delivering what you want. Steve Jobs, he knew what he wanted with everything that he did. And I was reading an article about their new goggles that have just come out, and they were talking to him about Steve when they were doing the work on the iPod, and he kept going, "I want it smaller. I want it smaller." And they go, "It's as small as it can possibly get." And he took it and he threw it in an aquarium. And he goes, "You see those bubbles? It can get smaller." I thought, wow, that's brilliant. But he knew, and he wasn't willing to compromise what he wanted based on a paradigm of what is or is not possible. And, you can say that and there are a lot of things about him that were very, very positive, and a lot of things that about him were very, very negative. But you have to say that his vision is still providing a standard for that company, and it's done exceedingly well in the technology area versus a lot of the peers that have just become a commodity. And so those are the things from starting out with a new client or a new business person is really getting your arms around what you're doing it for and why you're doing it.
In the book, you had mentioned several fascinating things regarding process, and I know you had mentioned earlier you weren't a process person. But can you speak a little bit to that and how you have changed and how process is important to you today?
Yeah, that I can help you a lot. I just finished my second book, and it's called Refining Through Failure: The Guide. And I have never been a process person, but about a year ago, I was visiting with a pilot. His name he's a person that I would call unconsciously competent. And at the time we were visiting, Jason, I said, "How many hours flying do you have?" And he said, 14,000. And I'm like, "Why, when you fly," and I'd flown with him numerous times, I said, "I've never seen anybody more diligent on following their checklist." Uh, Before he ever would start the plane, he would follow the checklist. As he's going through getting ready to taxi the plane, checklist. Get to the end of the runway, checklist. Going down the runway, he's calling out numbers. He's going through a mental checklist. And all the way up to where we're cruising altitude, and he's constantly on a checklist. And I said, after having 14,000 hours, why do you still follow the checklist like that? And he said, "Because I don't trust myself." And I said, "Okay." Because that really went against one of my core beliefs is when we become unconsciously competent, because we've done something so many times over and over again, we don't need a checklist. And nothing could be further from the truth, because he explained to me the law of normalization of deviation. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, "Okay, Jason, you got me stumped." And I usually catch a concept really quick. And he said, "Well, let me put it to you this way. Most of the people I serve are always in a hurry. And so if I pick up their need to be in a hurry, and I've got my checklist, and I'm somewhere in that checklist, I skip number 3 because we're in a hurry. And we go through, we have a successful flight, and there was no consequence for stepping item number 3. And tomorrow I'm in a hurry again. So I decide to skip step number 3. 2 or 3 weeks later, step number 3 doesn't even exist, because now I have normalized deviating from the standard. And so, as he explained, these things are on checklist because in an airplane, if you don't do them, the consequences can be really, really bad. And they're usually on the checklist because there has been an event where that wasn't done. And so that really got me on the journey of understanding why we have process, but a checklist for the sake of a checklist and just giving it to you without understanding the why. See, Jason gave me the why, because the cost of failure in that instance is so catastrophic. Mm-hmm. So now the other thing is what is the most catastrophic failure that can happen in an organization? When we have somebody that we've given trust to, and they go through the process of earning our trust, but when they have a failure within the business, whose fault is it? Generally speaking, in a command and control environment, I'm a big fan of Stephen M.R. Covey. He wrote the book Speed of Trust, and he also recently wrote the book Trust and Inspire, and he talks about organizations being command and control or trust and inspire. A command and control just tells you what to do, gives you a checklist, says that we trust you, and you go through what I call the tell, trust, fail cycle. Actually, it's the tell, trust, fail, yell cycle. Mm-hmm. And the yelling starts this shame cycle that we take a team member that is a hero, and with one failure, they become a zero. And why? Because we shame them for not being able to follow a checklist. But it's on us because we didn't help them understand that the process was there to protect them, protect their reputation. Because reputation ultimately is the greatest value that we have. And it's the hardest to recover. And so that's the journey that I've been on understanding why we need process, and learning how to start teaching process.
Yes, shame and blame because people can't follow a checklist. I think that's very prescient. I think that's very important. I just recently finished reading Rick Rubin's The Creative Act. Fascinating book. And he told a short story about this engineer was driving down the road and he saw an old man at a well. And the old man was lowering and raising the bucket with water inside. And the engineer said, "Hey, I know how we can do it better. I know how you can do this easier. I get a rope and a pulley, and I'll show you how you can make this a lot easier on yourself. And you'll never lose a drop of water again." And the old man, he thought about it for a second, and he said, even though the rope and pulley may make it easier, I have to concentrate very, very hard on every single motion that I make. Every twist and every turn of my hand and my wrist and my arm going up and down into the well. I'm afraid that if you give me something too easy, then I won't concentrate on what I'm supposed to concentrate on. And I think that resounds back to business as well. You have to give checklists when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to be doing it because they haven't taken it internally. Does that make any kind of sense?
No, it does. And being in a hurry is one of the hardest things. And, in the oil field, we're always in a hurry. But there's been more fatalities and more injuries and more property damage caused by being in a hurry than just about anything there is. And processes are meant to slow us down, and they're good ones help us think, not become robots, or help us understand the importance behind the process, that it doesn't become monotonous. It becomes purposeful. And so that's part of what I've probably the biggest change that has happened for me as far as a level of understanding of how to become much more oriented in the trust and inspire organization versus a highly controlling command and control. Works good for the military, but special forces, the SEALs, Green Berets, those are much more trust and inspire type led. Lots of practice, lots of process, lots of explanation that creates them to move extraordinarily fast because they know what each other is going to do. But it comes because they follow a process, and so that's been another part of my journey.
From the 10 rules that you so brilliantly laid out in your book, Refined by Failure, which of the 10 rules inform you on the daily, every day? Which are the rules that really stick out in your head and you remember every day?
I would say close to all of them. The profit first rule is not near as much as the focus. Um, although it needs to be if I'm running inside of a business, but um, all of the others have a component about how we care about each other. If I care about you, like somebody goes, the learning rule, why would that be in every? If I don't learn today from whatever mistake I make, it means that I'm comfortable with the consequences of that failure, and it's going to repeat itself. And I'm just going through all of them in my mind. You want to give trust, earn trust. I mean, to do that, you live the life as a trustworthy person. Um, if we're going to have emotional safety, I'm going to treat others as they want to be treated. I'm going to follow the golden rule, and that'll also create physical safety. Um, the vigorous debate rule. We need to. That's something that's not practiced very well. Or when we're instead of being we're really good at being disagreeable instead of disagreeing and seeking to understand the other person's perspective. Um, Settling for less than best. I can't see why we have one life and we're on a declining bank account from the moment we're born. Why would we not do our best? And then for me personally, helping others get what they want is really the core of what I've defined as my why. And I like to celebrate others. I like to celebrate events and recognize folks when they have birthdays. So I can't think of any of them that aren't appropriate to be lived as a whole. They're not in and of themselves. By one of them by themselves doesn't have as much value as them collectively.
While all 10 rules are very important, and of course, as you say, they all have a greater effect put together as opposed to separately, you couched everything in the book in terms of trust, because without trust, nothing can get accomplished. And that I thoroughly agree with. I think it's a lack of trust that erodes many organizations, many companies, many families, just any organization where there's more than one person, sometimes even by yourself. You're right. Once you lack trust in yourself, everything starts to come apart. Without a doubt, my favorite rule, however, is the Zig Ziglar rule. And that is, if you can help people get what they want, eventually you can have everything you want. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that particular rule informs your daily life?
Well, one of the things to be able to coach, you need to be able to do what you coach. And so, as I was writing the book, and even after the book was complete, I was really trying to grab and grasp my why. I love Simon Sinek, and start with why. And he really inspired me to invest the time, and it took about 16 months
Mm-hmm.
for me to really understand my why. And so, I'll share it with you. My why is I'm a person of influence, not position. And why? Well, I found when I'm in a place of position that you lose your influence. You're not serving others. You are, or have the potential not to. And so as I was going through, God really revealed to me that He wanted me to be more of a person of influence than of a position. And now that's a real boundary for me. I've had opportunities to go and take on roles that were positions, and those doors are closed to me for that. And so that led me to the second part of my why. So I am a person of influence, not a position, helping others get what they want out of life, the Zig Rule, so that at the end of my life, God will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And I thought I was done. But I had a friend, Garth Merrick, that passed away. And through a process of grieving and visiting with another good friend of mine, he had told me about a youth group that he led. And he had a talk with the seniors when freshmen were coming in. He said, each one of you is going to have an opportunity this year to be an influence on the freshmen that are coming in. He said, you are going to have the opportunity that at the end of this year, they're going to be a person that they don't care if they ever spend another day with you, or you're going to be a person that they wish that they had just one more day. And that so resonated with me that my why at the end of it now is that those that know me and love me wish for one more day. And so that's a boundary that I'm choosing now to measure the decisions that I make to live my life.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
I can see why it's taken you 16 months, because it's taking me quite a bit to process myself. That's incredibly profound and very, very important. Because in the end, that's really all that it is, right? We're all human, and one day we will not be here. But in the meantime, part of our life's mission is to discover our why, so we can focus wholly on that and self-actualize to the people that we're supposed to be. So how would you help someone try to find their why?
First, you have to know and have an understanding of how you got to where you are today. And so the first thing that I do, and in the guide, it is to write your story, to write the story that brought Christian to where you are today. And then understanding that's, you can call it self-awareness, but that's part of the journey, is to become aware of why you respond, why you act, where your hurts are, what are the things that really influenced the decisions that you made, because that's how you're gonna learn from your past, and then through going through a series of really discovering those things that are boundaries for you, that are your morals, your pursuit of excellence, whatever those things are. That is what really helps start set up the framework of your why. But you have to know where you are today. And a lot of times I find it's a lot more helpful to go back and really invest the time, effort, and energy to think about all those impactful moments that help create the Christian that you are today. And then you have the ability to really, as you said, look at what is possible within yourself and create a roadmap and plan it. And like for me, I turned 60 this year. My goal is that this next season of life is I have every intent to live it, living out my why in whatever place or role that I am. And so that's how it help. That's how it help, and I do help others start right there.
Wow, that's really profound, Lloyd, and actually a lot more than I think most people would have expected. So I really appreciate that. It's fantastic. Now, I want to go back for a second to something else in the book, and it only took 2 lines in the book, but I would like you to talk to a little bit about the idea. And I know there were attenuating circumstances, but when your business shifted from a lifestyle business to an investment vehicle, could you explain and talk a little bit more about that?
It's a great question. Um, Well, a lifestyle business doesn't have the focus is not in perpetuating it to become more. A lifestyle business is focused on generating as much cash flow that you can to live the lifestyle that it affords. And many times, a lifestyle business, when the founder, the owner, is no longer involved and or has died, the business crumples. It doesn't have something that can be perpetuated. An investment business is one that it becomes a business that is looking at how much we need to reinvest to become more. So it's more of a growth mindset and or choosing a destination. And we made that transition because our partners wanted to get to a place where the business could be sold. And so, you do those things, and it's much more process focused, much more changing the metrics to how much cash is coming through the business to what is being reinvested, what is going to be that return on that investment. Always looking for that next level of improvement and in revenue or in profit margins. It gets to be and it's just a mindset change.
In Michael Gerber's The E Myth Revisited, he states that even if you have something small like a bakery and you have one employee, it's more than just that one employee who's depending on you, because you have that employee's entire family depending on whether or not you're doing the right job, whether or not you're walking the walk every day, because their lives are counting on you. And that's a tremendous responsibility for any employer, as I'm aware. But what you had mentioned about your dad's funeral, hundreds of people that had showed in the thousands upon thousands of lives that your dad had impacted. What would you say, thinking back on your dad and your dad's legacy, what would you think are some of the things that you carry on with that today? What are some of the things about your dad that you remember in his accomplishments and in the way, in his bearing? What are some of the things that you reflect upon that?
Now, my dad, the greatest thing about my dad was his generosity. And he planted that seed in me. And I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be respected like him. I wanted the financial success that he had created. But what I didn't have enough understanding until I was much, much older was those were results of really of his faith. I mean, he was a very faithful man, and the attributes of generosity that he had were because of his faith. The way that he treated others were because of his faith. The the uh, the financial blessing that he had was because of his faith, and you it's a law that you can't outgive God, and he was testing that all the time. So those are the things that I learned about my dad. I only had him in my life for 20 years, and so I really didn't get the perspective of him being a friend as much as still being in that dad provider role. So, but now going through that same age of life. He was 55 when he died. One of the things that I really struggled with, and it concurred with the timing of me leaving Smart and writing the book, he had really been a barometer for me that I was judging myself against. And that was unfair to him, but it was really unfair to me and my family's. My why being to create and live a life after my dad, instead of really building my life around the person that is my Lord and Savior. And so, and that's who he was modeling his life after in reflection.
Wow, Lloyd, that's incredible. You know, my dad passed away about 10 years ago or so. And I think that like most boys, right, their father is their idol, is their role model. And all boys look up to their father. And of course, like even today, I would want my father to be proud of me and proud of what I've accomplished and proud of my family and the station I've attained in life. But my dad has passed away. So he'll never be able to see that or know that or enjoy it, at least in this realm, with me. So what I do is, since he can't be proud of me that way, then what I do is I kick it upstairs another level to my father, my true father, the father that I came from and the father that I will go to at the end of my life. And I give all praise to him that way. And I hope that he's proud of me, because that's the only way I can make sense of all of this. Lloyd, it has been a tremendously fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your candor and your openness. You've been very forthright and very honest. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of a really great man. So I want to thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for checking us out on this episode of The Oilfield Leader. And I want to thank you once again, Mr. Lloyd Brown. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Christian. Good. Thanks, Christian.
Well, everyone, that was absolutely amazing and fantastic. And we really want to thank Lloyd Brown for his time today. And I want to remind you, if you have not seen the cover, there you go. Refined by Failure, Breaking the Rules and Getting Burned by C. Lloyd Brown. An absolutely fantastic read. I don't think that you're going to really get this kind of insight from a CEO the way that you're going to get from Lloyd Brown. I promise you that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of The Oilfield Leader. Stay tuned, because next week we got another amazing episode. Thank you all and see you.
The Oilfield Leader podcast is brought to you by executive producer Daniel Corral, executive producer Jim Lynn, executive producer and voice talent, me, Mad Mac, production assistant Caleb Knott. The Oilfield Leader podcast is produced and hosted by Christian Lombardini. Copyright 2023. The Oilfield Leader and Christian Lombardini, all rights reserved. Peace.